Hi, everybody. Welcome to Attack with LarryC. I'm your host, Larry Christensen, and this is coming to you as being broadcast here on the 4th of July, and we have some nice fireworks to be appreciated. And we're going to start off with a very recent effort. Nice, compact little game played in the Russia versus China test match. And this is between White Nikita Vitiugov and his opponent, the Chinese Grandmaster Liren Ding. And this is an opening true to my heart. It's the same-ish variation of the King's Indian. We'll start off here. This is the same-ish, the idea behind the same-ish. It's very similar to a formation we all know, and that is the Yugoslav attack or the English attack. Bishop goes to e3, pawn to f3 to overprotect e4, and that sets up a nice battery on the long diagonal and possibly a kingside pawn storm. And it just stabilizes the center to a marked degree. Of course, it does white does lag a bit in development, but the fact that he has this nice wall of pawns in front of his pieces makes this line attractive to people who enjoy space advantages. Okay, so Ding castles, bishop e3, and now offers up a counter gambit, or a gambit. If d takes c5, dc, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes c5, knight c6, black gets good play in return for the pawn. White's got that lagging development. He's also got some holes on d4 and d3 that can be exploited. This knight on f6 quickly goes to d7, and he enjoys pressure on that long diagonal. It's a line attacking players avoid like the plague. So here Vitiugov develops solidly. And now black has options. He has moves like knight c6. He can play cd4 and go into a Maroczy bind Dragon Sicilian. That's not to everybody's liking. And or he can play what he does here in this game. He also can play knight bd7. This is a complex line that some favor. Knight c6, as I mentioned, offers up the pawn again, or white can elect to play knight d5, knight e5, and then knight g3. This is a popular line as well. And or now black instead played b6, and this looks a little suspect. Now white has to react accurately here, because let's say he plays the routine queen d2, then black will play knight c6. If d5, knight e5, then the pawn on c4 comes under attack, and black can get a nice Benoni type formation. In fact, he can play bishop a6, bothering that pawn. If white plays b3, tactics might erupt on that long diagonal. Black plays e6, and things are looking up for black. Here, white instead played d5, and this it's a good move. I often this is not recommended too early, because black can get a good version of a modern Benoni. But in this case, with the b6, black has trouble getting a knight to e5. If he plays knight bd7, for instance, white can just play f4, and that knight is denied a square. Black's kind of floundering. Knight g4, white just laughs and retreats, ready to kick at a moment's notice. Black cannot play e6 because he just takes and the d6 pawn falls. So here black immediately plays e6 to try for the Benoni formation, but now after knight f4, threatening d takes e6, or actually just threatening queen d2 and rook d1, or castles long, black, tough question is now posed to black, how to handle the tension in the center. Well, here Ding answers with e takes d5. He could also, if e5, that closes the center, and now after a retreat, a sensible retreat, let's say back to e2 or d3, white can pursue kingside attack. Black is hard for black to generate counterplay. So he broke the tension in the center. Now white takes on d5 with a piece. And now we don't get the Benoni formation. Black's stuck with a backward, vulnerable d6 pawn. He does have counter control over d4, but it looks like white should now emerge with some sort of plus. Okay, knight c6, queen d2, not much, but something he can work with. Knight takes. Okay, knight takes. Now black, maybe this is the fatal error coming up, at least in a practical sense. I think black has to get active here with f5. That was a better shot. Then if bishop g5 to disturb the queen, black can play queen d7 with fair play. If e takes f5, rook e8 check bothers the white king, and white certainly quickly lands in trouble. Now after f5, white can also play e takes f5, bishop takes f5 here, and just calmly develop bishop e2. That would be my recommendation. And white has a slight advantage. Knight d4. Can be answered by castles. And now if knight c2, rook a d1, knight takes e3, knight takes e3. Black still has a bit of a handicap regarding that d6 pawn. If bishop d4, white just slides away, he has the more safe king, the safer king. Better minor piece. That light squared bishop has a future and good long-term prospects, but not a bad course for black, and black has other options too. But f5 was, I think, a mandatory move. Instead, he plays bishop e6, and that lands him in trouble. Bishop d3. Now he can't. Black really has problems here generating counterplay with that knight sitting there. So he eliminates it and now occupies d4. Now white works around this knight quite effectively. Castles. b5. That's where black's counterplay resides, on the queen side. That's a perfectly good move. And of course here, in this type of formation, the white king now belongs on h1. Before committing yourself to some serious line of play, best to get that king position optimized. Basic plan here for white is rook a e1, f4, maybe trade off bishops, work around that knight, always keeping an eye too on perhaps a move like b4 to undermine that strong knight. But the basic idea is rook a e1, f4, full court press on the king's side. And now black finally connects rooks. Perfectly good move. Rook a e1. The build-up continues. And black plays b4. This was a move I think that burns some bridges on the queen side. Commits its if I had to pick another mistake, this is definitely a candidate. Black might better handle the position with rook a e8 or even rook a c8. To perhaps, depending on circumstances, go for c4. So b4, that really accomplishes nothing in the counterplay department and just wastes time. And now white gets right to work for his attack. And now another mistake by Deng. h5 does not, it's an involuntary weakening. It's a voluntary weakening of the position. Black just decides to play h5. I guess it's designed to give his king a little room and perhaps a foothold on g4 with the queen. But other than that, there's very little to recommend. h5. He might have considered instead the harassment move queen g4. It's a move designed to provoke h3, and then queen h4. and sort of throw white off stride. If bishop f2, maybe now queen back to d8 or even e7. And white's formation has been slightly gone off kilter. White still has a nice game. For instance, bishop g3, promoting e4, e5 looks promising. I think black would then, he's on the defensive, he'll play rook a d8, trying to meet e5 with counter pressure against d5, but then maybe bishop c4 looks promising. In any event, h5 really did not contribute at all to the defensive, black's defensive posture here. And now white gets right to work, f5, even though that the bishop on d3 now is playing a purely passive role, at least at the time being. He immediately poses problems for black. What to do about f6, followed by e5. That's the main idea. So the attack really is in full gear. Black must play bishop e5. Only move. He cannot allow f6 under any circumstance. And now white takes. Eliminates the knight. This is a key moment. Black has to play cd. And he's still in the game. For instance, and there is even some nice traps here. For instance, let's say white tries to mate with queen h6. Okay, looks good. Forces bishop g7. And now white plays queen g5, threatening f6, and as well as f takes g6. Then black must play rook a e8. Be nice if he had had that move in earlier. And one possible, then now white can win a pawn with f takes g6, but black is fighting back with queen g4. That's one value of having that pawn on h5. And after gf7, rook takes f7, black has definite fighting chances here, and the queen's on or off. That bishop on d3 is a bit passive. Now there's a nice trappy line after c takes d4, queen h6, bishop g7, queen g5, rook a e8. Let's say white tries to muscle this attack through with f6. Okay, looks logical. And then if rook e5, rook f5 is very strong. However, black's still kicking with bishop h8. Now his plan is rook e5, chasing that queen away, followed by queen d8. Still has some life left in the position. Not to mention queen g4 is lurking. Then if e5, black can defend with rook takes e5, rook takes e5, d e5. And now notice that this is very instructive. If bishop takes g6, looks crushing at first sight, but it fails horribly after fg, queen takes g6 check, queen g7, and that pin of the f6 pawn saves black's king and leads to a winning position for black. That would be an epic failure for white, so be careful. But after c takes d4, queen h6, bishop g7, queen g5, rook a e8, f6, bishop h8, e5, rook takes e5, rook takes e5, d e5, simply queen takes e5 does give white a sizable advantage. Rook e8, queen takes d4, and then let's say queen d6. There's no question white has a nice edge here. Now notice again, if bishop takes g6, the white's weak back rank means black has tactical defenses. But still white has the edge. But that was still a much better line of play than the very accommodating bishop takes d4, and now white's attack just finishes in spectacular fashion, but also very instructive here. He starts with e5, cutting the bishop off from the defense of the king. Takes. rook takes, eliminating black's best defender. Now f6, threatening mate. Queen h6 and mate on g7. Black must play king h7. And now white has a number of wins, but Vitiugov found the most elegant, beautiful rook f5, threatening rook takes h5 check, and rook h8 check. Don't forget, that's the real killer. If, for instance, e4, then white wins with rook takes h5, gh, bishop takes e4 check, followed by mate. Or, of course, king g8, rook h8 check, and mate. And, of course, also, if black plays gf5, white forces mate with queen g5 and queen takes h5. Last but not least, queen takes f5, bishop takes f5 is completely hopeless for black. If he cannot take the bishop, he's doomed. So after rook f5 here, Ding resigned. Nice game by Vitiugov. And now let's get to our main topic here on this 4th of July 2012. And this was a game played by Frank Marshall, one of my early chess idols, well known for his remarkable tactical skill. And this game played in Brooklyn, 1898, approximately 114 years ago, demonstrates Marshall at his best, in my opinion. I think he was better with the queen pawn openings than he was with king pawn. Okay, so, and this is a fairly modern looking opening. We have the semi-Slav Queen's Gambit declined. Black plays bishop d6. Of course, theory was in its infancy in those days. This is a mistake. Black should play, of course, knight f6 or d takes c4. This is a slight mistake. Now white opens up. And black cannot afford to lose that bishop. There's also the passive retreat, bishop e7, but white enjoys a nice space advantage. He checks. Slight mistake. And now we see Marshall applying modern principles. He has a space advantage. He does not want to trade pieces and plays knight c3. So he surrenders a bit of time to maintain his space advantage, keeping more pieces on the board. Okay, both sides continue. Rook d1, that's designed to prevent the freeing move c5. Now black plays c5, white has knight b5, queen b6, and now b4 is very strong. C takes b4, queen takes, a6, c5. Black's soon in a death grip, a bind. For white's got massive advantage. Space, development, everything. So Napier plays the completely sensible b6. Marshall builds up, bishop b7. Okay, so now white opening's finished. Now we're in the early stages of the middle game. White has a number of ideas here, led by knight e5 as one, followed by a rook lift, or the move chosen by Mr. Marshall, which was bishop c2. Now, often we'd like to play bishop b1, but here Marshall senses that this bishop may become valuable even from the square a4, depending on circumstances. So I think this is an improvement over bishop b1. Now, why that move anyway? Well, white wants to set up a battery on that long diagonal. Good. It's a good move, bishop c2. Black plays sensibly as well. He wants to play c5. It's too early yet to play c5. White simply d5 is too strong here. White will get d6 in, and black's thrown totally on the defensive. So he plays rook a d8 to planning eventually c5 and with some bit of amount of freedom. And now this queen g5 it's ultimately a very successful move, but he had other options here. Queen e3 was an interesting alternative, as well as knight g5 is interesting to provoke a weakness. Sort of a jab, flicking a right jab If h6, now black's weakened himself to some extent. Knight ge4. Positional, that comes with a positional threat of c5. Knight takes e4. Knight takes e4, and if c5, trying to free himself, white goes with d5, and now he's got very strong pressure. Black has other ways to handle this, but knight g5 is certainly a sensible move to provoke a weakness. Marshall's move, queen g5, now he should have been answered by h6, and I'm not sure where Marshall had in mind. Perhaps queen h4. Then if c5, white answers with d5 with strong play. However, black, after h6, queen h4, black might be better advised to try a6. That's to stop knight b5. Now white has to play this with some precision. So it ball's in his court, so to speak. If knight e4, for instance, then black can free himself with c5. d5 is no longer achievable. If a3 is a thought, then if c5, d5, white gets that powerful pawn on d5 with very good prospects. And a3 also sets up the possibility of b4. I think white has a slight edge, but he'd have to work for his point. Instead, black, after queen g5, black played rook f8, too passive. He's bringing this knight to f8 for defensive purposes, but it soon gets a little too crowded around the black king. Marshall now goes into his element, knight e5. Knight takes e5 would be horribly passive in that case. Total no chance for black then. If knight d7, white can dominate with rook d6, threatening a permapin on the d file. Other crushing moves too. He could lift the rook, also very strong. So that's just too passive. He tries to hold on with knight f8, but now classic rook lift here from Marshall. And perhaps I think it's basically it's over now. Black has no defense to this attack. Pushing down on h7. He wants to bring this knight into play, knight e4, and or rook d3 is also a possibility. Black really can't get out of this mess. He tries to create a defense along the 7th rank, hoping for f6, but now, of course, Marshall strikes. Beautiful, well, simple combination, but it took some judgment and foresight. So immediately rips into the black king side. Queen h4, threatening the knight, which cannot retreat because of mate on h8. Forced. Renews all the threats with knight takes f6. Black tries to run with king f8. Marshall, very good in such cases, had it all worked out. Knight takes. Queen h8 check. Now black's king is very difficult to flee. That rook's blocking one exit, and his knight's tied up. So Marshall brings up the reserves. He's got numerous possibilities here involving f7 and g7. So black, he just has overwhelming force now applied to a constricted, passive, vulnerable enemy king position. So now if c5, the desperate bid for freedom, white wins routinely with rook h7. If queen takes knight, pawn takes queen, rook takes d3. Notice the rook's on not on d1. Queen takes g7 check, king e8, queen takes g8, king d7, h4, easy win for white. So black has to get rid of this knight in some fashion. He tries f6. And now Marshall checks and puts the poor king in under a barrage along the g file. So switches targets now. g7 is the vulnerable target. And now if black plays rook f8, white wins, and that's the only real other serious try. White has a lot of wins here. Queen h5 is will do the trick, leading to knight h6. Notice that knight e5 check, black plays king e8. That doesn't, not convincing. Knight takes rooks are also not that convincing. This is much more convincing. Knight h6 practically forced. White can pile up the pressure now then with rook df3, and black has no serious defense to the threats. Now if king g8, knight takes e7, followed by queen takes h6 wins. If f5, white wins with knight e5 check, king g8, queen takes h6, and it's very much a rout. But instead, Napier played, after rook hg3, tried rook e7 to e8, and now a nice little finish here from Marshall. Knight's career had been remarkable, finally goes to its glory on e7, now threatening queen takes g7. If king takes e7, white mops up with queen takes g7 check, king d6 c5 check, and black loses control of the queen. And if queen takes g3, desperation move, white wins with rook takes g3, king takes e7, queen takes b7 with an easy win. So after knight e7, Napier resigned. Nice little game, not massive fireworks, but a good little sparkler, and a game worthy of a 4th of July attacking show segment. Well, that'll be it for today. I invite you to join me in future investigations of attacking play. This is Larry Christensen, over and out.